Welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Chat with Lorin and Rob. Hey, Lorin, how's it going?
Good, Rob. How are you?
Well, I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. But, I got some questions,
Oh,
and
good.
I thought we'd start with this one that really jumps off because I think it's that starting point for a lot of folks when they walk in to any store and they start to look at products they're interested in, and that is packaging. And packaging, and there's so many different ways to go with this, and I get it. We've all had the discussions of the ingredients, all that. Just talk about and start with packaging from the standpoint of all the little emblems that are on there and certifications and the this and the that and all the pretty pictures. It is marketing. That's the bottom line. that's
Yeah.
that's what it's supposed to be. But there are some gotchas and maybe just some, hey, let's raise your awareness. The whole point of this is to help everybody get a little bit better at what they're doing. Where do you start when it comes to packaging, and what are some of the I don't want to call them gotchas, but what are some of the things that maybe jump out because they're supposed to jump out that don't have the significance or at least the impact that maybe we would otherwise give them?
Yeah. So let's stick to pet food on this for right now because it varies somewhat with regard to human food. So my two hot buttons would probably be human grade
Yeah.
and organic. So the human grade. So that seems to be a term that everybody bats around. It's human grade. Look, you'll go to Super Zoo and some manufacturer will have cans open. They'll go, look, and they'll put it on a cracker and they'll take it, and eat it just like, and I'm like, oh gosh. Um, Human grade has very specific requirements to it. Um, I mean, the fact of the matter is humans can eat a lot of things that, ugh, that,
Right.
that's somewhat subjective. There are things. I lived all over the world, and there are some things that I'm like, oh no, that
Right.
no, no. Um, so the actual requirement for human grade is that it be made in a human grade facility. And what that means is a facility where human food is made also. And when the food is being made, there needs to be a USDA inspector on the premises at the time that the food is being made. Not occasionally, not dropping in, not, random checks, things like that. He or she needs to be on the premises at the time that the food is being made. So, and keep in mind that as I'm saying this, I've been doing this so long that I've seen so many changes from what I thought something meant to what it means now because money gets in the way of everything
Right.
that things change. So very few pet foods are human grade. A lot more say they're human grade than actually are human grade. Um, I like to think that eventually that'll get cracked down on. And in some cases it has, but you can oftentimes look at the ingredients and that's the kind of questions that you want to have from the manufacturer. It's an interesting thing because in a retailer group, I was having a conversation with some people and I said, let's face it, in everything we consume, there's a level of trust, right? Because we're not there when it's being made. We don't know where the ingredients are coming from. We know what they say, we know what they tell us, but we don't really know because we're not there. And it's like that with everything consumed by anybody consuming any foods. Um, so human grade is one that is great, but should not be taken lightly. For example, I don't know of a single human grade kibble,
Right. Right.
that's actually human grade. Now, is human grade necessary? I would say yes, but it's subjective. somewhat. And the example that I'll give is so it used to be that offal, OFFAL, would be thrown away. And that would be the things that weren't considered um, food.
Right.
And that would be like tendons, bully tendons, the body parts, some of the organs, things like that. And those are considered to fall into that category of awful, along with some other things. Um, and look at they become their own category,
Yeah.
and they're very expensive. I can remember when you could get some of those parts for nothing. I mean, literally, you could go to a farm and say, "Hey, what do you do with those?" Nothing. I throw them away. Great. Can I get those?
Right.
For my dog. And now it's like, no. I remember there was a particular brand that I carried their cowtails, and they were super popular because they were super inexpensive, and they lasted a decent amount of time, and they were probably this long or so. And I want to say they were 69 cents at retail. So all of a sudden you couldn't get them one year, and we couldn't get them for 3 or 4 years from that company, and they were hard to get anywhere. And come to find out, when I spoke to the manufacturer, it was because the Asian market was buying it up. And whenever anything is in competition with the human ingredient market, the human consumption market, there's always more costs. There's always more value put to it. So it's
Sure.
really hard to justify paying the kind of money that they would pay for something being consumed by humans to, that money being paid for something being consumed by animals at that time, especially. When they came back on the market, they were this big, and they were 3 to 4 times the cost. Take
Right.
it or leave it. That's what it is. So those kinds of things, those body parts now are super valuable. They're their own category in the industry, and they're pricey, and that sort of thing. The organic labeling.
Well, wait. Before you go on to that, there's a couple things because I want to jump in.
Okay.
First of all, I absolutely love that you just did this and then that and then this because depending on how folks are watching, and I'm watching on multiple screens, that is a much different um, view of how big they were.
Yeah.
But I think it's such an important point because that's the other part of this that sometimes folks misinterpret because labeling and packaging changes and you sit there and you look at it, well, that's not what it was. But to your point, ingredient costs can fluctuate wildly.
Yes.
And I think that's a part of all of this. Um, and I know you and I have talked about how, I've got a daughter who has allergies. And so I am one of those ridiculous, I've got to read the label of everything I buy every single time. Well, that extended into my pet space. And
Right.
that's the interesting thing that this sparked is that we also get lulled into same packaging, same product
Mhm.
and things change consistently.
Without notice.
Without any notice, without any, hey, we have shifted the balance of the ingredients for whatever reason. It might be the
Right.
cost of the ingredients, it might be, the availability of ingredients. I mean, remember
Sure.
when we were going through the pandemic, there were just things you could not get access to for
Hmm.
a variety of reasons. And, but it looked the same. That packaging looked like it did before the
Yep.
pandemic, looks like it does now after the pandemic. So I think there is a lot of um, just awareness we have to have.
Right.
It'd be nice if there was that, requirement of, hey, when you change the ingredient mix or this or that. I always chuckle to myself, as a tip for all those, vendors out there, when you're like new, improved, people like me want to look and go, where? So maybe call it out on your label, or more likely, yeah, you don't want to call it out. And so you're
Right.
not calling it out. And you're leaving it for folks like me to go through and figure out, well, hey, wait, and unless you have, and this is just one of those tips, that's why I'll take pictures of the ingredients. I want to do
That,
anytime, anyways, because if for some reason I end up with a, sick human, sick, uh, pet, I, I'm not going to recall all that, right? So I just take
right.
a picture. But so it is interesting. I'm sure a lot of folks think I'm scanning for pricing if I'm at some place and looking at my phone and looking at an image versus another. But the reality is, many times I'm looking to say, what did change in this? Let me see, and I think, you know, we can argue how deep you need to go into the ingredient lists and all the rest of that. But at a minimum, be looking at that first 10, oh, okay. Hey, has something changed in here? Because now I really need to take a moment and understand, is this still the same, that I trusted, that I believed in, that my pet is doing great on? So I just wanted to call that out. I think
Hmm.
that's just such a great thing. The other thing too that's interesting in what you were sharing is that availability side of things and the impacts of trends around the world. And I'm someone who does like the exotic ingredients and things of that nature, and I use things. I know you still won't eat at my house. That's okay. I promise it'll be an experience. Um,
No, I don't want that experience.
but I will say that um, that too is really interesting, and I, I I have a tendency to sometimes stock up on things that I really
Right,
see successful, because I know it's almost, and I don't want to say inevitable, but it is almost impossible for it to be at that same level for such long extended period times, 10,
hmm
14, 15 years, which is what I'm wanting out of these things, right? Once I find something that really works. Look, I just upgraded my phone and I haven't done that in 7 generations, because once I find something that's working, I can upgrade the software. I can do this. You can't do that in the pet food world or
right.
nutrition. So, that's that other element, because I have seen that happen so often. And I know one of the reasons that you and I joke about the ingredients. Um, yeah, I do like cricket. It was interesting how that was not available for a while, because it caught on so fast, so quick. And here was the interesting part, not here in America. Yes, there was some embracing of it, but not like it was in other parts of the world who really understood the sustainability, the overall impacts, and we're going over that at some point because I'm a big proponent
Yeah,
of
not today, not today. But
that.
I lived in Japan and, and traveled quite a bit and China and, it's just some of the things that I would not even cross my mind. And oh gosh, I mean, gives me the willies right now even to think about it. But it's just very commonplace,
Right,
and more power to them. My
right,
my
yeah.
my problem is my head. I
No, no, no,
can't.
so but I think you also, and I want to circle back on this because I thought this was really great. This is a great statement. Um, I don't know many human grade kibbles. I love that because that's the reality. And you and I have been at the shows where the first time someone did that, and they did that for X amount of days and all that, I was like, I'm sure you're doing that under your doctor's guidance too. But I thought brilliant from a marketing standpoint. You and I, and we've got the business mind, so we see the totality of the pictures, and I got what they were trying to do. And sometimes, I feel like people have to go to extremes that I'm just not needing or wanting to engage with. But that being said, I think that's also an important call, because just something is human greed doesn't mean the rest of the process that it goes through keeps it
Right,
in human grade status.
right.
And that's the marketing and all the rest of it that I go, because I'll hear people say that, like, oh, I got this. This is so great. You should think about it because it's human grade. It's human grade. And I've been involved with a number of businesses and I've been in those discussions of, yeah, we should put human grade on the label because we blah, blah, blah. We meet all the qualifications, all this other stuff, and it's important to people. And yes and no is my answer. It's important. Well, okay, it shows a higher level of commitment. It shows this and that. Um, but at the end of the day, you know, I'm one of those that you're really trying to target and I want to know all your processes then. Because did
Right.
you keep it human grade throughout it? Well, if it's made in the facility and it comes out, it's still human grade. Uh, that's not what I was asking.
Right.
So I like that, you and I love these are the reasons we do this because it's those little nuggets. It's like, yeah, you know what? Because I'm guilty. I fall for marketing all the time. I love that. I'm sitting here right now with my grounding mat underneath me. So yes, folks, I am barefoot. But yeah, it is. It's really important, and I want to stress, nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with that being one of the criteria for you in your decision making. But just be aware. Just be aware
So,
and understand that impact.
so I'm a label analyzer, and I
Not
look,
you, really?
yeah, I look at, so somebody had brought me in a product they were using, and I looked at it and it said, or blank organic, I don't know what kind of spray, skin spray or something like that. And I looked at it and I was like, hmm. So I turn it over and I'm looking at the ingredients and I said, do you know what organic means to the client? And she goes, well, yeah. And I said, what's it mean? And she goes, well, it means, I said, I'm not looking for a technical explanation. What does it mean to you? And
Right.
she goes, well, it's natural and it's, the best possible form that you can get. And I said, okay, that's not unreasonable. I'm sure a lot of people think that. So I turned it over and started to read her the list of chemical ingredients that were in
Yeah.
it. And I said, they're using it as a descriptive, not as a legal term. Now it's at one point they tried to crack down on that. Honestly, I wish they would crack down on labeling more so that it was a little more transparent. But there's so many things that um, when you go back to the human grade part of it, what about the packaging? What about the handling? How about the storage of
Right.
it? It goes beyond that
Right.
to what you were saying.
Right.
So I mean, cricket is organic. That doesn't mean I'm going to eat it. Oh.
It's not just organic. It's great for anyway. We'll move
Ugh.
on. I know everybody's groaning out there, so let's talk about organic because I think that's a great call out by you.
Well,
Human grade and organic. Yeah, go ahead.
before we get to organic, because you were talking about labeling, so there's been a trend, and we weren't going to talk about human, but I'm going to use it as an example. There's been a trend in the human market in very teeny tiny print that you have to really scan the label 3 or 4 times to find in some cases,
Sure.
contains bioengineered ingredients.
Right.
Do you notice there aren't any pet foods that say that?
It's a great call out. You're right.
There's no requirement that anybody lists contains bioengineered ingredients. I care more about that than I
Right.
do whether something is organic,
Yeah. Yeah.
because bioengineered is so fraught with problems that, I mean, it's like the minute we find anything that says bioengineered, it immediately gets put back because for our foods. So I want that for animal foods. So that's one of the questions I think that when consumers or retailers talk to a manufacturer, that's one of the questions they have to insist that they get an answer on.
Right.
Does it contain bioengineered ingredients? Um, Instead of, are your ingredients organic? In a perfect world, that would be great. How many of your customers are going to pay for that additional cost of organic? And here's why there's an additional cost. The irony is when you buy organic ingredients, like at a grocery store, they're ugly. They're not pretty. They're misshapen. There's a whole company that has a business based on ugly vegetables,
Fruit, yeah,
you
fruit and
know?
vegetable. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it.
and I've gotten that box before and I was like, yep,
Yeah,
it's ugly. But it's not non-GMO, it's not manipulated, it's not, sprayed with something that will keep it looking beautiful for, you know, 8 weeks. Um, so the issue for me lies in there is so much added cost to organic when really it should be the other way around because you're not doing anything to organic. You're not using glyphosate, supposedly. You're not supposed to be. You're not supposed to be using a lot of chemicals and sprays and things like that.
right,
Supposedly, there's been some leniency given on that now, and so if you're not spending that extra money for all that stuff. If you're not making it uber shiny, where you have to soak it in ACV in your sink, to get whatever is on it off, um, then it should be cheaper, right? But
right.
it isn't cheaper. It doesn't work that way. And so now you are being forced away from organic deliberately into manipulated ingredients
Sure.
because that's that's the direction that everybody wants the consumer to be in. So if you have organic ingredients, you are inevitably going to have a higher priced end product. Is the consumer going to continue to pay that? Because some will, you
Right.
know, but the vast majority, when you're a manufacturer or retailer, that's a struggle to deal with. It's I'd almost rather have them say that they're sourcing non-GMO, which again is not biologically engineered or
Sure.
messed with, and have a little bit of a lesser end product in cost, so that more people can get into it. Because
Right.
if the reason that everybody eats processed food is because it's so cheap.
100%. And so I don't want to stop your role there, but I do want to kind of go back to what you were saying is it should be cheaper because you're not having to do some of these other things. But I will say this, having been involved in a couple of companies that had that situation where we were, I mean, even with one of them for pest control using predator wasps and ladybugs and things like that. Even if you're not doing some of the standard things, there are other things that these businesses are doing to
Absolutely.
that quite frankly, I think the bigger issue when it comes down to the cost of it is because it's not being done on scale, the
That
way
too.
that other things are done at scale. So that you and I both know, impacts costs and overall loss ratios, et cetera. But from the standpoint of, I do think that, so the bigger thing for me, I love, by the way, that you're calling out the GMO issue because one of the things for me when we get to the processes is if you dive deep into the processes of what it takes to be certified, there are a lot of gaps in that process.
Hmm.
And I know, there's one area I was involved in that I will just flat out argue until my end of days that because public demand was so high, there was a lot of oh, here comes a Rob word alert. My kids would be screaming shenanigans. That literally, when I would have conversations, whether it was with the consumer, the stores, other manufacturers, other media folks, experts, I would say, do you understand that that organic certification that you're touting is not the same as it is here in the US, by the way?
Right.
And this is being routed through other countries, being what we would call organic washed, so that by the time it came over, it was still a organic product, but yet it would not have maintained that throughout the processes here. Um, and then, I'll tell you what, one of the most remarkable experiences I had was with and again, that's why I love technology. A company that was developing a process to track organic from the moment it went into the ground on through the end of the packaging. And they had these little sensors and all this other stuff. It was just mind blowing. But it also pointed out to me, ain't nobody doing all that. And that's that, buyer beware part of, if they're not doing all of this,
Hmm.
you you can try to do your best, and that's all any of us can do. But don't have that false notion that, oh yeah, it's because it's on a label. That's not there, because and it was interesting because in that process, one of the things that I learned, and I remember being out in this nowhere space and them pointing to the farm literally, miles and miles away. And I'm like, yeah, let me borrow the, goggles here so I can see that. That is so far away. What do you mean? That has a direct impact here as you're putting down the seeds. And they were like, well, in about 3 hours, the winds are going to kick up. It's going to blow everything they're doing. So we can do everything right here.
Right.
If not, um, just one wind blowing. And we see that in those that, have a farming background. All there, you're like, yeah, I got that, Rob. I knew that. But I didn't. That wasn't something I was really aware of. Certainly when I'm looking at packaging, I don't see where's the nearest, competitor or farm field. And I remember one of the other interesting things is that, you see these marketing materials, and I'll just say there was a company that was touting they had the largest, fields and this and that. And I knew where they had their fields, and half of that grow area was not usable, yet they own the land. It's kind of like buying a house that has, 15 acres and 14 of them are all downhill at such a steep grade that you couldn't build anything on it. But hey, you got 15 acres. You really have 1 acre that's usable. And so as you go into those things also impact these labeling that's going on here and that marketing that's on the packages. And I love that you called out the I don't whatever the ugly fruit and vegetable place is. I did that as well. Because at the end of the day, once you use it and cut it up and all the rest of that,
Tastes the
doesn't
same.
any yeah, it's the same. And I've got another takeoff on that, but I want to let you get back to your thoughts on organic. But those things just jumped out, and I had to share that.
Well, the other problem too is I remember when organic first started making a foray into pet food. And I was like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
And over the next few years, the variety of certification companies and their individual seals that started popping up, I was like, oh, okay. Just like everything else, now people realize that for a fee, we'll certify your food as organic.
yes,
And I'm like, okay, now you've lost all credibility. So I think that like everything, it's you just constantly have to be on it. You have to constantly be aware and be all over it. So I don't care as much about the organic as I would like to because
right.
of that.
Good way to put it.
Yeah. The other one for me that was really always a touchy subject for me because I had a holistic pet supply store, where we carried things for the whole body, that which is holistic. There's things that you're supposed to look at when you deal with an animal holistically, you look at every part of the animal.
Right.
So the first time a holistic kibble got pitched to me, I had to really bite my tongue.
Do you have still a
And
video of that? Because I would just love to see your brain
oh,
just
I was
the smoke out of your ears.
yeah, I
That
was
oh,
incredulous. I was incredulous. So I'm looking at the rep going, what does
that poor
holistic,
guy.
yeah, what does holistic mean to you? What does
Right.
holistic mean? In terms of your food, what does holistic mean? It's all natural. I said it's not all natural. You have a synthetic vitamin pack in here, so you've already on that one. What else does it mean? Tell me how your food and I do feel sorry for the guy in retrospect because he figures I'm the perfect place
Right.
for his food because it's a holistic pet supply store. And I'm like, no. Um, but I said you have to understand that if your food doesn't affect the whole of the animal in a positive way, it isn't holistic. And yes, it absolutely should be natural. Every part of it should be natural. I can list in your ingredients what parts aren't natural. And there is no such thing as a holistic pet food. I mean, just by the nature of most of the things that have to be in it. And my favorite is there are a couple of pet foods that I like a lot. Um, and they're commercial and I feed a couple of them to my kids and they would be as close as you could possibly get to holistic and not one of them uses the term and I respect that a great deal.
Yes. So so true. So true. And by the way, and so I want to call that out because you had said something earlier, and for the folks watching, thank you for watching. But also, when you see me reaching over, I'm writing notes. I've got multiple screens up. But this one jumped out at me, Lauren, when he said these entities pop up, and you can pay a fee, and now all of a sudden you've got something else to put on your label. And I will say that having been on all different sides of the industry, that is something that happens so much. And early on, I used to buy into that so much. I, advise clients and, businesses that I was consulting for. You got to have this, you got to have that, you got to have, and I'm not going to say I've done a 180, but I've done a 179. And I am like, what does that really mean? Not just to you, but to the consumer looking at it. Because if it's not in alignment and have the same value, I'm not sure that for your core audience who is educated or who is expecting this to mean what it appears to mean, it can almost be a negative. So to what you just said, where it's like, I respect sometimes it's not on there for a number of reasons. And if you push even further, when you look into those things, to your point on that rep coming in, and I do hear he's out of therapy at this point, so about 10 years. But from the standpoint of what does this actually mean? Most folks don't know what these little certifications mean and all that. Some of them very relevant. Others maybe not as relevant as they should be, and that we would hope them to be. And so I will watch, and it's interesting because there was a time not too long ago here where we saw a lot of labels being redone. And I would look and I'm like, nope, the ingredients are the same, but something's different. Something's different. And I'd look at the next picture and it was the front of the package, not the back of the package.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be like, oh, that's gone, that's gone, that's oh, interesting. And then I'd have to want like, well, I don't really, give much validity to this one anyway, so that doesn't bother me. But that's that part of it, right? And I think as an industry, when you start to look at those things, you really have to say, because again, my overall hope is that everybody's doing these things for the right reasons, not just for marketing reasons, not just for feel good reasons. Um,
You're
but you,
idealistic.
yeah, well, I was gonna say, you and I know the reality that drives most of this many times. And I can remember being at one of the big trade shows, and this entity that in our space, you wanted to get in there because they had a ton of stores. And I was there with one of my clients, and they were like, if you go get this and have it on your label, we'll carry you. And we were getting a lot of pressure. And I remember talking with the founder and president of that company. I was like, well, neither you nor I give much credibility to that. So this isn't a discussion of the validity of the certification and can you get it? You can get it because you can just buy it.
Right.
Um, so what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? And this and that. And so it's such a great point. But there's a lot of us that don't get that chance that you did, not just to talk to the rep, but you can pick up the phone and call in and talk to a lot of the key people at those places. So I wanted to put a pin on, kind of wrap up like, to me, no harm, no foul. If it's got that, um, there's a reason that they thought it was important, but it's not going to be a decision maker for me. I'm not going to sit there and be like, I'm buying this or not buying this because it has it or doesn't have it.
No, but
Unfortunately,
that's you. It is harm and it is foul because for the places that actually go the extra miles to do it the way the right way and to earn those certifications by doing things the right way, they get lost in the mix of you can't tell what's legit and what's not.
yeah,
And that's my problem with it. It's like, so everybody just stop using the certifications and that kind of stuff. You called me to your point about the story that you just told with the guy at the certification sticker on the
yeah,
products. You called me and asked me what that certification meant to me. Do you remember that?
yeah. Oh no,
Yeah. And I said,
honestly, yeah,
nothing. It means absolutely nothing to me. And you said, would it affect you carrying a product that had that over not carrying a product that didn't have it or something like that?
right,
And I was like, I don't look for it. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I want to have a conversation. I want to know where the ingredients are sourced. I want full transparency. I don't take anything at face value because I'm going to keep digging. And God help you if you lied to me, Mr. Manufacturer, because now I believe nothing you say. It's better that you tell me the truth. And I've signed NDAs and things like that. Tell me the truth. I'll make a
yeah,
decision if it doesn't fit for me and my business. You move on. You have the right to run your business however, buyer beware, but so do I. And if it doesn't fit for me, it's better that we just that you're transparent with me. I make the decision on whether or not I think that I can deal with that. And if not, we part ways friendly. And oh, by the way, this is a small industry and people move around. So I know that the next product that you may be repping, I'm going to be
right,
able to trust what you tell me because you've already proven that I can rely on you to tell me the truth. So it is a harm and it is a foul. It's misleading. People rely on it too much. They are buzzwords. And it's just like the pictures people put on labels where, and it's on everything. You open up, anything food related, and you're like, where the hell is that? you know
right,
it doesn't look anything like that, and coloring pellets to match the thing on the front of the package does not fool me into thinking that if it's green it's broccoli.
right,
It doesn't. I mean, it's confounding. So it's very manipulative. We all buy into the packaging because listen, that's what we want for animals. We want to be able to do the best. We want, oh my gosh, we want that plump chicken that's on the front of the package and those fresh looking, beautiful vegetables. And we like thinking that. And when we turn the package around, we read that those things are in there. They're in
right,
there, but they may not be what you think they are.
right,
And so we want to buy into that. The problem is we are buying into that. No questions asked. And that's
right,
why marketing works. And it was such an education for me over the 20 years of dissecting manipulative responses. Real quickly, there was somebody in my group that, had, uh, and this became for a short time habitual, where customers would reach out directly to manufacturers and ask them things about their food.
Right.
And then they would post the email response in my group, and I'd read it and go, okay, let's read between the lines on this, and then some of them would go back and ask again more specifically, and still it was a manipulative response. I mean, they're incredibly gifted at the vague, sounds great, hit everything you want to hear type of response. And what does the average consumer do? Great, perfect, because it's what you want to hear. And you
Right.
don't ask anymore and you don't dig any further. And it absolutely is problematic. And the last one before we get away from this for
Yeah.
me would be made in the USA.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh,
So
thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
that drove me crazy for years because reps would point out, made in the USA. It's made in the USA. I'm like, uh-huh. Assembling all the ingredients together on US soil is not made in the USA. So where did each of the ingredients come from? Blank, blank. And now more people ask that, and it's a bigger thing. But early on, it was well, I'm I'm convinced that reps used to go back and be like, why can't she just buy it? I mean, everybody else is buying it. Why can't she just buy it? I have to go and dig all this crap up for her, and it's like, you don't have to. I just won't carry your product. It's super
Right.
easy, but those are the questions I'm going to ask. I want to know where this comes from. I want to know where that comes from. And I've had to go so far because some people squirm, including management in some manufacturers, squirm because they don't want to tell you what they got to tell you. And it's like, listen, I know that there are certain vitamins that only come from certain
Right.
countries.
Right.
I'm aware of that. Okay. So know that I know going in, just be upfront and be transparent because I'm going to do that with a customer who asks me. And so I need to know all of that so that I can then tell the customer, listen, here's your options. Here's the truth of the matter. And if you remember back to when they were talking about whether or not they were going to put on the label of, of different products, but I think originally it was meat, a country of origin and that kind of thing.
Right.
And, of course, the meat lobby has all pushed back on that. And it's like, I don't get what the problem is. I'm the consumer. You obviously think it's going to have such a negative impact that you're fearful of it, manufacturing organization. So test it. If you're so sure about what you're doing and how good what you're doing is, just put it out there. Let the consumer decide. Not everybody's a freak like me. Not everybody is going to care to the level that I care, and I get that. And but the choice should be there of you getting to decide, I don't want to feed that. I don't want to give that. I don't want a synthetic vitamin pack. Good luck, but
Well,
you
and
narrow
and
down your chances.
I think the other part of that too is think of how much better we'd all be off. I am someone who uses ingredients from around the world. And my kids and all my friends are probably sick of me using the term, here's another Robism, biosphere. I use, hey, this comes from the richest biosphere. Hey, do you know what biosphere that comes from? Because let's be honest, made in USA or sourced from the USA is not always the best ingredient.
No,
We have really stripped a lot of the benefits from our land over time. And so if you were forced to, not forced, but if you were curious and then you wanted to look up, wait, this says it came from XYZ place or XYZ country. And oh gosh, there's another one too. Laura, how many times have you and I seen people and heard people claim, I will never buy a product that has anything from XYZ country?
Right.
And they've got their hands full of products that have, at a minimum, the ingredients are from that country, if not 95% of the makeup of that product.
Or the vitamin is that
Right.
is
Well,
being
but that's
used.
exactly the point, right? And I just sit there and go, uh-huh, gotcha.
Well,
Because
I didn't. I actually sat with clients and go, really? Okay, well then let's have a frank conversation. And then they're like, well, what do you
that's when you're
have
a better person than me. I
that
don't
doesn't
argue
have?
with the
Well,
wall.
I wouldn't argue, I didn't argue with them, but it was like, if you're coming into my location and that's a concern for
Sure.
you, you
Good
know,
point. Yeah.
let
That's
me tell
great
you,
customer service.
but
You know,
inevitably the reality, and you watch, I mean, it's almost, you can almost see it. The reality of, well, unless you want to make it yourself and figure out how you're going to source the ingredients and find out where they're from,
right.
then you're going to have a difficult time getting anything in a consumable commercial product that doesn't have something, and there's so much misunderstanding. Frankly, the EU has higher standards than
Right.
the United States. I would take something made in the EU in a heartbeat over something made in the US. You take products that the same company makes an EU version and makes a USA version, and you look at it and it's like, can I order the EU version? Because
Right.
there's four ingredients. The US packaging shows 11 or 18 ingredients, an oath of tiny print bioengineered may contain bioengineered ingredients. And it's like, we get stuck in this thing that it has to be USA. I agree. Sourcing in the US would be my first choice for certain things. Just be
Yes.
upfront and tell me what the ingredients are and where they come from. And if they fit for me, or if I have the information so I can tell a client, so full disclosure, and they get the choice, then that's the way I want to run my business. And it never hurt me. It never hurt me. It never worked against me. Worst case scenario, I then would teach someone how to make their own food, and say, okay, but you're going to have to make sure that you cover all the bases with the
Right.
ingredients for the right vitamins. Because if you're going to start adding things, now we have to look at that. So it just isn't as easy as people want it to be,
Right.
and I want it to be easy, but it isn't that way. So there's some things that you have to give on, you have to acquiesce on. And, and if you choose not to, oh my gosh, I've been down that road and I lived that life for a few years and it was hell because it was hours in the grocery store, it was hours researching stuff, and you finally reach a point where it's like, screw it, I'm not even hungry anymore. I don't even want to eat because I can't find anything to eat. So,
Well, and that's that holistic part of it, by the way. You lose
yes,
the joy, you lose it, and you're doing it out of frustration, stress, and all that. I'm one of those that believes you transfer that into what you're making,
yes,
and the energy around you is off. Your pets, they absorb that. And so, to your point, we all want it to be easier. And that's where that practical judgment and buying sometimes, and that's why, to me, I wanted to have this conversation because the easiest is walk in, grab something, walk out. But that's not the best. That's not better. That's just the easiest. And so, to your point, and I wanted to say this too, because here's another fallacy, but you just shared something really good. And I know we're running a little bit longer, but I think this is important. You can start with the best ingredients, whether you're a manufacturer or you're at home yourself. And the way that you prepare these things, you can take it from being the best possible ingredient to the worst during your prep of it. And you and I have talked about I love,
microwave.
yeah, oh my God. I love sous vide, right? And
Me
we
too.
talk about
Me
that.
too. Yeah.
And so, but not a lot of people have that at their house, right? I mean, there's only so much room, so many things, and to your point, it's like I have so much time in the day, blah, blah, blah. So I think just for me at least, I was just like, hey, breathe, exhale, do the best that you can. And again, if you're getting so far down that you're now lost any joy and comfort in this process, you got to take a step back
Well,
because,
degrees
yeah,
of relativity. You have to bring it back to, here's your ingredients relative to keeping intact as much as you can. You prepare it this way versus that way.
right,
You can't necessarily know everything about where a company gets something. So you choose as wisely and as carefully as you can and move on. If you get bogged down in it, you'll make yourself crazy because I've been there doing that. And the fact of the matter is there's so much that is wrapped up in the genetics of the animal, the environment, which
right.
is another conversation on another day. The exposure to chemicals, the exposure to what you put into their bodies or on them. That there's so many other factors. And then you have those kids that live beyond, so far beyond expectation, in spite of all that,
Right.
and they become the poster poster kid for, well, I fed kibble, my dog's whole life and they live to 18. Yay, I'm thrilled for you. I'm thrilled
Yeah.
for your kid. I seriously could not be happier. But the fact of the matter is that I would then want to sit down and actually do an in-depth, how many chemicals did you put on your kid and in your kid? How frequently did you vaccinate? What kind of vaccines did you get? What was your environment like? What kind of cleaners did you use? Did you ever have air purifiers? And all of those other factors. Because if all of that was missing, maybe the body could withstand the one thing or the two things or something like that. Whereas a lot of times people won't change anything but the food, and they expect that to be the panacea for everything else. you know
Amen. Yeah. It's a foundation, not the totality.
right.
I love that you called that out because you're right. And that goes back to something you and I have talked about many times, which is quick solutions and quick fixes. And there are things you can do, certainly, but it's over time that the
Mhm.
real impacts often happen. And that's that part of this. That's phenomenal. So we have been going a long time. Thank you to everybody who has hung with us throughout this practical pet chat. As you can see, Lauren and I are very passionate about so many different things, and I'll bet when you started with us on this journey with this chat, you didn't think we'd be going for an hour plus just on this one pathway, and that's why we're doing these, because there are so many things that we talk about where we could take one topic and go in so many different ways. Lauren, it is always so much fun. I am so happy that we get to share this with everybody. Thank you again to everybody out there who's listening. Lauren, I know you want to say a couple things at the end, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. So we actually encourage you, if you have questions or topics that you wanted us to discuss or expound on at all, practicalpetchat@gmail.com is the best way to get to us. It's practical pet chat. It's not plural, it's singular chat at gmail.com. And ask us whatever questions. Keep in mind, we will not respond directly to you. We will use some of these things to discuss them on the podcast. We just don't have that kind of time. It's just Rob and we have real jobs. So when we don't have the kind of time to respond to everybody, but we want to cover some of those things so that everybody can benefit from that. So please reach out to us and then have any of your friends or family that you think can benefit from this, coworkers, whatever, let them know where to find us. And we really, really appreciate you guys, sticking with us, listening to the information that we put out there. And we hope to see you again the next time.
Yeah. Thank you again, Lauren. Thank you, everybody watching, listening. Make sure you hit us up on all the social media channels. We look forward to our next chat.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.